This is the Conscious Planet Network with your host, myself, Guyana Sophia. In these episodes, we'll be diving into inspirational stories of change, new technologies, and people really making a difference. There is just so much going on the planet right now that is helping to change humanity, our planet, and the future, and we need to know about it. So be sure to subscribe to the show so as not to miss any episodes. The Conscious Planet Network is an exploration of the evolution that is already in progress, one that you and I are a part of, that's happening on an individual and global level. There are so many people right now who are contributing to changing the tides of our future. Are you ready to be inspired? Well, welcome back. Today I have Dan Jason with me. He is committed to empowering people to grow their own food and save their own seeds. He created the mail order seed company Salt Spring Seeds in 1986, which specializes in heritage and heirloom, open pollinated and non-GMO seed varieties of vegetables and plants. Dan was strongly involved in seeds of diversity in the early years and founded the Seed and Plant Sanctuary for Canada in 2003, which he now heads. Dan has written many books, including Awesome Ancient Grains and Seeds, Saving Seeds as If Our Life Depends on It, and his most recent book, which is Changing the Climate with the Seeds We Sow. I love that idea, Dan. Changing the climate with the seeds we sow.
I like that idea too, because of course sowing seeds is a metaphor for a lot of things, and I'm all about seeds, but I'm also about just the way we are on this planet in terms of relating to the planet.
The depth and wisdom that comes with that, sowing the seeds. So I learned a long time ago, I want to explore this with you, and about sowing seeds and how they how we can change our climate. Does this have to do with having varieties of seeds that basically they're not GMO, so they're not they haven't been scientifically changed for hybrid reasons, and so they can call upon, these seeds can call upon all of their ancient knowledge that can help the environment at any given time that they're planted. Does that work that way?
That's one good way of saying a little bit about it, yeah.
So what else is there then? Or how can you expand on that? Or
well, I could expand on it forever, but pretty much the patented GMO hybrid seeds are all about, say, seeds with designed for corporate profit, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And not only that, the GMO seeds are designed to be used with herbicides.
Yeah, so they're more herbicide than they are plant.
Yeah, that's totally true. They're more about selling the either the herbicide or the pesticide or the fungicide product than the actual seed itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the seeds that I write about, especially in the latest book, but in all my books, are seeds that have been around for 10,000 years. And it's really important that we maintain the diversity of those seeds, because depending on where you are, different ones will be appropriate for different occasions and different uses. Mm-hmm. And the ones that can really feed us are all the old beans and grains and seed crops like flax and sunflower seeds and soybeans.
Mm-hmm. And those are the ones that maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but
jump ahead.
Okay, let's jump ahead. We're just going to jump around, but we're going to make sense. So a friend of mine was telling me that you're storing or you're growing those types of seeds on this island, so that eventually they can be stored for if there's any kind of issue that happens on the planet and we get cut off. Being an island, we could get cut off from like the rest of the world pretty easily. So storing these seeds so that people can still survive. Is that right?
That's right. And talk about Salt Spring being an island, but there's islands everywhere. I've just been on Cortez Island and Quadra Island, and I'm talking about the same thing.
Exactly.
People learning how to take care of themselves where they are. But you can stretch that a little bit farther, and the way climate change is going, you don't know when any place will be an island, whether it's in the middle of the continent or whatever, as what happened not long ago in northern British Columbia.
Yeah, out in the boonies, you could be like a Prairieville, or
all of a sudden you might not be able to get through on your highway.
That's right. So thank you for doing that, for one, for this island, but also thank you for because it feels like you're sharing this knowledge, right? This is something that feels really important for our global community. This is something to learn from and put attention on, and bring people together to help them realize that they can do it.
It's really, really important because we don't have that much left. Right now we're in the middle of an election campaign, and you have people like Justin Trudeau talking about, we'll meet these carbon emission requirements by the year 2050. It's totally ridiculous because
it's too late.
It'll be too late. Yeah. We have to figure it out now and do the best we can to learn how to take care of ourselves. And these old beans and grains are not so old. They're still alive and well. And the beauty of them is they don't have to be refrigerated, canned, kept in plastic. You can just, after you've harvested them, just keep them cool and dry in the right containers, and there's no processing except for the time that you need to cook them. And that's a really good thing.
Right. So it's storing them for food and also storing them so that they can grow. We can grow them again. Yeah.
And the significance, it's quite interesting that they're both food and seed at the same time. A lot of our garden crops, like tomatoes and squash and lettuces, those you have to go through a process for saving seed. But all the beans and all the grains, it's the same thing, really. It's just what you choose to do with them. So
that's a really good point.
You keep some back for the next year's planting. And it's as simple as that. We have a major project going on now as part of our seed sanctuary here on Salt Spring Island, where we've started growing a lot of these seeds out at Ruckle Park. And this past season we had a patch. Mike Lane, who's the caretaker there and who manages all the animals, we've talked to him about rotating with his sheep and having a 5-acre patch where the sheep have been and planting all these crops, and then the next year moving to another one and another one, and that'll take forever to get through all the land at Ruckle Park if this goes ahead. But this was our first year, and we planted really a considerable amount, and the harvest was phenomenal. And now we have all these seeds for next year, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. And so in the not too distant future, when we have the traditional bean supper at Beaver Point Hall, we'll be able to just have all the beans that were grown at Ruckle Park, and including the very one that's called Ruckle Bean, which is really cool.
That's very sweet. Well, what I love about this this plan is that it can expand even further at some point and actually create sustainable communities. It's you're setting up for survival, but you're also setting up for actually creating a system for communities that can just keep going with that, and because it will need to rotate, like the beans and rice or the beans and flax could it? It will need to be sold at some point if it's not used, right? So it's like it can be going back into our systems in that way. Or
this is mostly about not being in the realm of money. This is mostly about feeding ourselves, because
that's even
I have my
beautiful.
seed company, Salt Spring Seeds, and that's income generating, but the Seed Sanctuary is a non-profit, and it's all about feeding ourselves and getting beyond the money involved. That's usually
That is
the
just
case.
beautiful. So what happens when you get too many seeds and stuff at one point, if we're not going into any, if we don't need them right away, what are you going to do with them?
If we had too many seeds, we'd start to laugh and celebrate and be pretty joyful about it. But
And make lots of potluck dinners.
Yeah, the thing is, we have over 10,000 people on this island, and at this point, the food that we grow on this island is a very tiny amount of what we're consuming. I was at the fair bringing someone to the ferry early this morning. The giant trucks that were coming off that ferry onto Salt Spring Island, it's just staggering that we depend on that. And if the ferries stop going, where are we going to get that food? So I don't see it being an issue of having too much food, because there's the food bank and there's the homeless people and there's communities and all kinds of communities that need to be fed.
Yeah. Okay, great. Excellent. So could we talk a little bit more about how we change the climate with seeds? How do we do that?
Well, it comes down to just by being conscious of our food choices and not buying into a corporate agriculture that indeed is creating climate change on this planet by its plundering all our resources and poisoning the land. And we begin to start to change the climate of the climate we have now doesn't consider Earth, is not connected to the Earth. It's just about how to make money. And we have the absurd situation where Canada is the world's largest exporter of beans and chickpeas and favas and lentils and dried peas, and we ship them all over the world. But we don't even eat any of our own. We eat less than 5% of what we grow in this country.
Yeah, I don't see anything made in Canada in those from those vegetables or seeds.
Yeah, you go into a health food store and you'll find that those things are imported from somewhere else.
Wow.
And that's how our world economy works. And that's where all these greenhouse, probably half of all the carbon emissions are coming from trucks and planes and boats that are transporting food and the way we relate to food. And most people don't factor that in because food permeates everything. We don't think of it in an isolated fashion. But really, what's the number one occupation in North America? Driving a truck. More people drive trucks than any other thing. And most people who are driving trucks are transporting food. And it's time we got back to local and organic and taking care of ourselves wherever we are. And if we do that, we cut out a huge amount of what's creating the problem on the planet. I mean, there's other things for sure, but by my calculations and from other people too, it's over half of the greenhouse gas emissions can be directly related to our relationship to food. I mean, if you just consider that, we send. Send those pulses to China and India and the Middle East, and we buy them back, and we could be having them here. And we send apples to New Zealand, and we buy apples from New Zealand, and on and on and on. It's just the big corporations have figured out a way of creating scarcity and making it seem like they're out to save the planet because there's not enough food. But really, they're the ones that are perverting the way we should be taking care of ourselves, which is basically from where we are, not from elsewhere. And that's the way the First Nations people lived here forever and ever. They didn't didn't have to go thousands of miles to figure out how they were going to feed themselves.
Yeah, there's many things on the planet that we need to shift in order to create a sustainable future and create a future that is gonna, it can serve us, and everybody on the planet, all the animals, and so we can actually live together in peace and harmony, and it doesn't have to be that we're without that we don't have things, because we actually do have an abundance of things in our local zones, right? And so the only thing I would miss would be bananas for like, it's a harder thing to, I would think, transport up here.
A little bit hard, but we have Banana Joe Clemente on this island. He's growing bananas,
Really?
which shows us that it is possible.
Really?
And if the climate's going to warm up a little bit as we go further
Banana
north,
Joe.
then pretty soon we're going to be growing avocados here.
Uh-huh.
And there's somebody called Jane Squire who's just harvesting her avocados as we talk right now.
I just met her. Yeah. And
so
she's got like a huge space that she's doing.
All kinds of tropical fruit.
Yeah, so
and semi-tropical
fascinating.
fruit. Yeah.
So
We
fascinating.
can do a lot more than we're doing.
Uh-huh.
You wouldn't have to miss anything.
Oh, really? That would be amazing.
It
So,
would be amazing.
so then it's
Will
like,
be amazing.
then that's a shock. That's a shock that's possible. That it's that if we're not going to miss anything, then it's just a few adjustments that we need to make. And so we can make that on a personal level by the choices that we make, for one. So what type of food that what we choose. And for two, supporting our local farmers as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And how can we help the diversity of food in our local areas? How is that?
Well, by celebrating it. And that's what my seed company is all about. Just so many diverse cultivars of all these crops that we could be growing. It's a matter of getting to know them. And I often say in my talks, we know so much about all the different kinds of coffees and all the different kinds of wines and beers and cheeses and meats. Hey, it's about time we got to know the different kinds of beans, and we got to realize that beans don't necessarily have to give you indigestion. It's just because we're normally eating old beans that have gotten dry and can't absorb water anymore and don't cook up very well. But if you eat your own pretty fresh dry beans, you don't have any of those issues. We have to educate ourselves about the quality of foods.
Uh-huh. Yeah, wow. Yeah, and also that we do have the ability to change what we eat. I'm sorry, I have to come back to this, that it doesn't actually, that we don't have to go without, because it's a shock. Okay, so it's still shocking to my system.
I'm glad you're shocked. It's,
Well, I really had this idea that, like what you were just talking about, like with the big companies, and I am sure now, I'm starting to feel like it was sold to me that we can't have these types of varieties without their help. And so...
they'd love you to think that.
Well, I do think, I had thought that until like 10 minutes ago, Dan.
Ooh.
Right? This is good. This is why you're here.
This is good.
This is the type of shocks we need. It's like, oh, well, actually, it doesn't take as much as we thought. We can shift things. And even those who are, farmers who may be listening, it's like stepping into other areas that maybe aren't as widely, explored, nuts or like other types of fruit that,
For sure. It's not only about the annuals. It's really good to have as diverse as possible your choices, including all the kinds of fruit trees and all the kinds of nut trees that you could have, and all the perennial herbs and medicinals. It goes on and on. And you want to grow as much diversity as possible so that you have, in any given year, if something fails, other things don't fail.
Mm-hmm. Right. Wise words. So basically it's all of that. So it's all of the change that needs to happen. And I love that, every time I walk into Foxglove Farms, which is our local, what would you call that?
Plant nursery.
Yeah, it's a nursery. And I see your seeds there. It makes me feel really good, because it makes me feel like, someone is protecting, these seeds. Someone is keeping them alive. These, ancient seeds, these seeds that have traveled with people, through time. And And like I said in the very beginning, I brought up was that they have the ability to shift and change as the environment shifts and changes. At least this is what I've learned. So maybe we can talk about this a little bit. So when there's an environmental issue that's happening, so if there's a lot more storms, do they have the ability to call upon their genetics that remember that how to look after themselves in a storm, or is it environmental in that way, or is it are there other factors?
No, it's not. It's not quite like that.
No, tell me about it.
These plants have been around for 10,000 years, and they're widely adapted everywhere, but they don't adapt quickly to change in any 1 year or in just a few years. If you were growing the same bean at your farm for many, many years, it might adapt a little bit to a shorter growing season or the soil that you have, but all in all, they are amazingly the same, considering that they've been around that long. And it is in the genes to be widely adapted to various growing conditions, but the genetics don't really change. They're not quite like our modern day tomatoes and lettuces that have been bred to be, a lot of selections have been made.
Right, so people are various involved.
Things, but the beans and grains, what any good farmer or gardener normally does is choose the best from every season, depending on what you're looking for. It could be earliness, it could be yield, it could be disease resistance, it could be especially taste. And the more you do that, the more you get a really good variety of anything that's adapted to your conditions.
Right. And then people could just do their own cross-pollinating, but in a natural way, if they wanted to upgrade.
Yeah, you could do your own cross-pollinating for some things, but it's very different than the kinds of genetic manipulation that's being done.
Yes.
In the name of,
Yeah, getting in genetics is different. Like getting in there as a scientist and like manipulating is much different than Mother Nature's way of doing it, which is much more orgasmic.
It's definitely orgasmic.
Yeah, it's a part of life, right? So, we all cross pollinate. That's how babies are created, right? So, that's definitely a way of an enjoyable way of creating varieties.
Yeah, it's better than putting pig genes into tomatoes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, much better. Like, no, it's just wrong. Well, is there anything else that, because you've got this new book, Changing the Climate with Changing the Seeds We Sow, is there anything else in there that you would like to bring up that you feel is relevant for our listeners?
Well, just as you're talking, perhaps I could quote the very last paragraph in the book, which isn't by me.
Oh, cool.
It's by an author that a lot of people know. He's named Thich Nhat Hanh.
Oh.
And I quote just a short paragraph from him, and he says, "There's a revolution that needs to happen, and it starts from inside each one of us. We need to wake up and fall in love with the earth. Our personal and collective happiness and survival depends on it." That's it.
Wow.
Pretty powerful, pretty true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. We have to love the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not treat it as just something to be used and just taking what we need from, and without any respect and love and honoring.
That's it. It's just coming back to those three essential things: respect, love, and honoring. It's anything can grow under those conditions, and I think it's definitely coming back to that place in ourselves and how we relate to the people around us, as well as, most importantly, how we relate to the earth. Those are the key ingredients for moving forward, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Dan, for coming onto the show. I feel like you're such a leader in so many ways, and I really appreciate everything that you're doing. It's funny because this is such an essential, normal thing that should be happening everywhere. This is something that we all, it's like need to uphold, those who are, forerunners in this area, because this is our livelihood. This is how we can survive. This is, and I really appreciate you doing this, and looking after the planet in this way, looking after the community around us, and also the communities far in distance, and all those who care and want to see change. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And may all be well fed.
Yeah, exactly. So if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Well, Salt Spring Seeds site is just saltspringsseeds.com.
Okay.
And I'm always answering my emails and my phone calls, and you can get me at dan@saltspringsseeds.com.
Okay, so it's saltspringsseeds.com. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. Well, all the power to you, and keep it up.
Okay.
I hope this show inspires you to walk to the beat of your own drum. May the stories shared here today inspire us all to see a greater vision of what's possible for our collective future. Want to hear more of these shows? You can find this podcast, The Conscious Planet Network, on any podcast search engine, including iTunes or Podbean. Or listen live on your computer every Friday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time by Googling islandsradio.com. You can find out more about me, Guyana, at guyanasophia.com. That's spelled GAIANNASOPHIA.com. If you know of a special someone who would love this program, then be sure to send it along to them. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Planet Network, broadcasting to you from the Gulf Island Community Radio. See you next time.